Republicans who will not be voting for Trump this time around. What was the breaking point for you? I was raised in an ultra-conservative family. I only started to pay attention to politics during Obama's presidency, which I was promised would result in Sharia law being imposed on America. I saw Fox, my parents, and those around me rail against Obama every day, listing off the various ways he would destroy the country. I cast a vote for Trump knowing that in a blue state it didn't really matter, so I didn't have to question, research it, and figured he would lose anyway, absolving me of any blame for a Clinton presidency. My biggest regret is making the popular vote closer. My family, Fox, and those around me have all completely rejected their values to follow Trump. Every day he does something they vowed Obama would do to ruin the country, and they twist themselves explaining why it's actually a good thing. My good wholesome Christian family members are now some of the most genuinely racist and least intellectual people I know. But there are other siblings like me as well. And they give me hope. It took me about 3 months of being a casual follower of politics to start being involved in local elections, driving an hour plus to vote, and actually paying attention. I've, hopefully, started to make up for my mistake by voting more intelligently in the last primary and having discussions with the siblings that are asking similar questions. I can say without hesitation that people who are voting for Trump are either utterly politically apathetic, formerly me, or filled with hate, whether they think about it or not. He simply isn't an intelligent vote with all we've seen. Thank you for your candor. I don't know if the rally took place before or after he was elected, but I didn't see it until after. It was the one where he talked about how he hates windmills, and I believe he said he knows more about wind than anybody. Then did a bit about not being able to watch TV because it's not a windy day. That was when I became embarrassed about my vote and started to regret it. It only got worse after that. Those things was hilarious up until you realize that someone that said that could be one of the world's most powerful people. When he tweeted about a fake Russian propaganda bullet article about how the old man that got pushed over by the cops and in the hospital for a week was a spy. Can't even believe how stupid Trump is. Can't believe that people still support him. I think that perhaps for some remaining Trump supporters, they struggle to admit they made a mistake in voting for the guy, because they have attached so much of their own ego to the decision. So the continued support is now more about a personal refusal to admit that they were wrong in their character assessment as opposed to a continued genuine belief in the man. I also think that given how many entire families tend to politically align themselves, and find it a point of personal pride to proclaim how long they have uniformly and steadfastly supported a certain party, that this also makes it very hard to individually switch allegiances, because doing so can mean alienating yourself from the rest of your family, setting yourself up for unwanted conflict in the process. It can be like losing an actual part of your identity, and very unsettling to your sense of structure and stability in life, making you question everything that you once stood for. A loss of faith in a leader can be a very stressful experience that can have a lot of repercussions in your life, so sometimes it's easier to just try and keep on justifying things and looking the other way, although obviously this can only go on for so long. Trump is so divisive. He is alienating people who have supported Republicans for generations. I freaking know. My boss, who is in his 30s and works a salary at a pizza joint, had hella a lot to say about AOC, Bernie, and liberals in general. However, I've had conversations with him where he would stutter and still manage to find a way to decriminalize Trump's actions. I recall showing my friend the injecting disinfectants incident and we were just laughing. Motherfucker got ears like a freaking owl over here and storms to the front exclaiming, "Is there a video though? Ladle. Is there a video? Did you actually see it happen or was it some liberal article?" I pulled up the video. He still managed to chalk it up to sarcasm. Literally, if they found dead bodies in the basement of the White House with Donald Trump's DNA all over the corpses, video evidence of the murders, and hostages that can point him out, my boss could still find a way to make Trump seem decent. The way he talks to world leaders is an embarrassment to our whole country. Some people are just too dense to see it. I mean, famously the European leaders were mocking him behind his back. The UN laughed in his face. That's one thing I'll never understand about some Trump supporters. One of the reasons they choose to elect him is because they genuinely believe Trump is a strong man and projects American strength internationally. They also believe Obama was weak and the world made fun of him. The reality of a Trump presidency is this: the UN laughed in his face. World leaders talked about him behind his back like girls gossiping at work and laughing. And for the most part, he sat alone with no one wanting to do business with him during, I believe, meetings with the G7. After all that, now Trumpsters say perception is irrelevant. As an Aussie that lived in the US and attended college in the US, this is spot on from our view. However, Trump is considered a joke here even before the election. I honestly believe this is a serious misunderstanding of how he was perceived internationally prior to the election, not just after. When he posted a tweet about not going to be a bad president that would go golfing for a month, but that's what he did. Pretty sure he has golfed more than any president in the past. And he chose to golf in Florida, which burned through all of the Secret Service budget almost immediately. He actually often stays at his own hotels in Florida, funneling the Secret Service budget into his own pocket. I went to college with a woman who says but he donates his salary. $400,000 does not equal millions and millions and millions of taxpayers' dollars. Not only that, but he's hardly the first president to do so. Obama donated his salary, more than that, in fact, to charity, quietly and with no fanfare. Herbert Hoover donated almost all of it, and even used some of it to boost the salary of his staff. JFK donated his presidential salary and his congressional and senatorial salaries. George Washington initially refused his $25,000 salary, but Congress advised him that it would set a bad precedent, pardon the pun, for a president to refuse his salary. So, he accepted it to use for expenses. This is a difficult question. For context, I am 22M, and 2016 was my first election. Anyway, here goes. I didn't like him when I voted for him. Edit. I supported Kasich in the primary, and ended up voting Cruz, because he had the best chance of beating Trump in my state of Indiana. I really only chose him, because he wasn't Clinton, and as I am a conservative, there were some things he pushed that aligned with my views. However, since the election I have been progressively less and less impressed with both him and my party. It's hard to point to exactly one thing that pushed me over the edge, but the major events that catapulted me away from him are probably the following. Grab them by the pussy. Mocking a disabled person. My brother has Down's syndrome, so this one really gets to me. His tendency to nickname everyone he competes with. Lion Ted, Crazy Bernie, Sleepy Joe, Crooked Hillary, Do Nothing Democrats, etc. My dad repeated one of these a while back, and I let him know that if he continued to use these terms, I would instantly lose much of my respect for him. His mockery of John McCain. Most of the GOP's handling of the impeachment process, and especially Romney's speech in favor of impeachment. His photo shoot in front of the church after tear gassing the entire place. Perhaps the biggest one is the impact I've seen on the people around me. After the 2016 election, people I had tremendous respect for suddenly became extremely hateful and vindictive. Perhaps it was always there and I was too young to notice it, but it was striking. More generally, I am sick of America's leader, and to a lesser extent, its people, being the laughingstock of the world. I am no fan of Biden, and didn't really like Obama that much either, but enough is enough. In hindsight, maybe I should have realized all of this sooner, but I really wanted to like him. After all, some of the things he had done happened years ago, and I believe people can change. Beyond that, he was the candidate I voted for. I wanted to be right. There were a handful of things he did that I agree with, and I clung to those, hoping that I could stand behind them, if nothing else. But after all this, I could not ignore his transgressions. Barring something extraordinary, I will be voting blue come November. I will not be looking forward to Thanksgiving with my parents this year. You have a level of objectiveness, self-awareness and nuance that most people never achieve, let alone in their early 20s. I bet we disagree on a lot, but I respect people like you. Yes, I second that. As a left-wing European I would probably have a ton of differences with Op, but still, it was quite a treat to read such an honest and reflecting account. And I have found myself finding this quality in a person more important than aligning in your beliefs, even your essential convictions by now. It's a lack of these qualities that is causing the extraordinary problems of this time more than anything else. Comparing his coronavirus briefing ratings to The Bachelor. Was that the one where he lost his it at a reporter asking a softball question of what do you say to Americans that are scared? He went on a rant about a terrible reporter he was for asking that and how good his ratings were for these speeches. I talked about this to one of my Trump-loving co-workers and she said well it was a really stupid question, and when I mentioned he could have very easily chose to forego his own ego and unify the country a little bit by giving some Americans thrive through adversity bullet for the media, she just stared at me blankly like I was the idiot. I truly don't understand how these people's minds work. Not very well. That's how.